The graphite felt wrong in my hand. For 10 years, the pencil was an extension of my arm, an instrument of precision. I'm an architect. I design homes, places of sanctuary, of clean lines and predictable angles. My life was built on the same blueprint. A loving wife, Claire. A restored Victorian in a quiet suburb. A thriving practice. Everything measured, everything known. But that afternoon, as I sketched a new commission, my hand betrayed me. The elegant gable I was rendering morphed into something else. The lines grew jagged, frantic. A window became a gaping mouth, the chimney a twisted spire of smoke. I dropped the pencil as if it were hot. On the page, where a welcoming family home should have been, was a caricature of a house. A house in flames. I shook my head, the image fading like a bad dream. It was stress. A big project, long hours. That's all it was. Claire came into my home office then, her presence a soft counterpoint to the sharp edges of my anxiety. She placed a mug of tea on my desk, her hand resting on my shoulder for a moment. "Still at it?" she asked, her voice the calmest sound I knew. "You'll wear yourself out, David." I forced a smile, covering the disturbing sketch with a clean sheet of vellum. "Just finishing up. One last detail." She leaned in and kissed my temple. "Don't be too late. I'm making that risotto you like." I watched her leave, her familiar grace a balm. See? Everything was fine. Perfect, even. My life with Claire was the only life I could remember, and I wanted for nothing more. We met 10 years ago, a whirlwind romance that felt like coming home. I'd been drifting, working odd jobs on the coast, no family to speak of, no real history. Claire gave me a foundation. She anchored me. She was my entire world, and our life together was the masterpiece I was proudest of. The mail arrived the next day. Bills, architectural magazines, and a small, padded brown envelope with no return address. My name, David Thorne, and our address were typed in a plain, sans serif font. Inside was a single object, nestled in a fold of bubble wrap. It was a key. Old, iron, and eaten through with rust, like something you'd find at the bottom of a well. It was heavy in my palm, the teeth worn and jagged. I tried it on our front door, the back door, even the old chest in the attic. Nothing. It fit no lock in our carefully curated life. I tossed it in the junk drawer next to the spare batteries and foreign coins. A curiosity, a mistake. Someone else's past, mailed to the wrong address. A week later, another envelope arrived. Same anonymous sender, same typed font. This time it held a photograph, faded and creased at the corners. A young man who was unmistakably me, maybe 20 years old, stood with his arm around a woman. Another man and a teenage girl stood beside them. We were all smiling, squinting in bright sunshine, a wooden porch behind us. I didn't recognize the house. I didn't recognize the people. The woman's hair was the color of straw. The man's face was kind. The girl had my eyes. I stared at my own younger face, a stranger's face, full of a life I'd never lived. A chill, cold and deep, settled in my bones. I was still holding the photo when Claire got home. She saw it in my hand, and for a fraction of a second, a shadow passed over her face. It was so fast I almost missed it, a flicker of something guarded, something, afraid. "What's that?" she asked, her voice a little too bright. I showed her. "It came in the mail. Do you recognize any of them?" She took the photo, her fingers delicate as she held it by the edges. She studied it for a long moment. "No," she said, her gaze fixed on the smiling strangers. "I've never seen them before. The man, though, that's definitely you. Must be some old friends from before we met. From your traveling days." She handed it back, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "It's a nice picture. You look happy." But that was the problem. I didn't remember being that man. I didn't remember that day, that porch, those people. My memory of life before Claire was a gray fog, a collection of vague impressions with no faces or names attached. She always said it was because my early life was lonely and unremarkable, and that our life together was so vibrant it had simply overwritten the dull past. It had always made a certain kind of sense. Now, holding this photograph, it felt like a lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the dark, Claire's steady breathing beside me, and I thought about the man in the picture. He looked like me, but his smile was different, wider, more carefree. His eyes held a light I didn't recognize in my own reflection. Who was he? Who were those people who looked at him with such affection? I slipped out of bed and went to my office. The house was silent, filled with the ghosts of my own questions. I took the rusty key from the junk drawer and the photograph from my desk. I placed them side by side under the lamp. A key to an unknown door. A photo of a forgotten family. They were pieces of a puzzle I didn't know existed, and they felt less like a mistake now and more like a message. Or a threat. I found myself standing in front of the junk drawer at 3 a.m, holding the key. On impulse, I went to my laptop and typed in the only detail I had, my own name. David Thorne. Pages of results appeared. My architectural firm, articles about my award-winning designs, our wedding announcement in the local paper. All of it started exactly 10 years ago. Before that, nothing. No birth records, no school yearbooks, no digital breadcrumbs at all. It was as if I'd materialized out of thin air on the day I met Claire. She'd found me sketching in a cafe by the sea. I was passing through, I'd told her. I'd told her I was an orphan, that I'd grown up in a series of forgettable foster homes, and that I had no one. It wasn't a lie, not really. It was all I knew. Or all I thought I knew. My search for David Thorne was a dead end, but the photograph offered another path. I scanned the image at high resolution and zoomed in. The details were grainy, but behind the smiling group, a small wooden sign was tacked to the porch railing. I could just make out 2 words, Havenwood Inn. A quick search for Havenwood Inn turned up hundreds of results. But a search for Havenwood Inn and fire narrowed it down to 1. A small, family-run hotel in a town called Havenwood, Maine, had burned to the ground 15 years ago. The article was brief, a local news report. The innkeeper, Robert Asher, and his wife, Mary, had died in the blaze. Their teenage daughter, Sarah, was also presumed dead. Their 20-year-old son, Ethan, was missing. Ethan Asher. The name felt like a stone dropping into a deep well, the ripples spreading out in the dark. I stared at the screen, the cursor blinking over the name, my heart hammering against my ribs. Asher. The family in the photo. The man and woman, Robert and Mary. The teenage girl with my eyes, Sarah. And the son, Ethan. The man who looked exactly like me. The third package arrived 2 days later. This one contained a child's drawing, done in wax crayon on faded construction paper. It depicted a stick figure family, a mom, a dad, a girl, and a boy, standing in front of a square house. But this drawing was a nightmare. The house was on fire, with angry red and orange scribbles engulfing it. The stick figures had excess for eyes, all except for the boy, who was running away, his back to the scene. I dropped the drawing on the kitchen table as if it had burned my fingers. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was sending me pieces of a forgotten horror. I had to talk to Claire. Not the casual, dismissive conversation we'd had before, but a real one. I waited until she came home from the yoga studio she managed, my nerves stretched taut. I'd laid the items out on the dining room table, the key, the photo, the drawing. An exhibition of a buried life. She stopped in the doorway, her gym bag slipping from her shoulder. She looked at the objects, then at my face, and her carefully constructed composure finally shattered. Fear. Pure, unadulterated fear washed over her features. "David," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Where did you get that drawing?" "It came today. Just like the others." I kept my voice level, a forced calm that felt brittle enough to break. "Claire, what is this? Who are the Ashers? What happened in Havenwood?" She shook her head, backing away slightly. "I don't know. It must be some kind of cruel prank." "A prank?" My voice rose, the calm cracking. "Look at me, Claire. Look at the man in this photo. That's me. His name was Ethan Asher. His family died in a fire 15 years ago, and he disappeared. Don't tell me this is a prank." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, David. Let's throw it all away and forget about it. It's the past. It doesn't matter. It matters to me." I finally yelled, the sound echoing in our perfect, quiet house. "My whole life, my entire identity might be a lie, and you want me to forget about it? Did you know? All this time, did you know I was someone else?" She flinched as if I'd struck her. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. Her refusal to answer was an answer in itself. She knew. She had always known. She just looked at me, her face pale, tears streaming down her cheeks, and whispered, "I did it to protect you." "Protect me from what?" "From my own life. From my own family." The foundation of our marriage, of my entire world, crumbled in that moment. Every shared memory, every story she told me about myself, was now tainted with deception. She hadn't just helped me build a new life, she had curated it, edited it, and erased anything that didn't fit. The next morning, she was gone. A note was on the kitchen counter. "I need some time. I'm at my sister's. Please, David. Don't go looking for him. Don't go looking for Ethan. Let him stay buried." But it was too late. Ethan Asher wasn't buried anymore. He was standing in my kitchen, in my house, looking at my life, and he wanted answers. I packed a small bag, took the key, the photo, and the drawing, and I started driving. There was only one place to go. I was going to Havenwood. Havenwood wasn't a town you passed through, it was a place you ended up. The highway narrowed to a two-lane road that snaked through dense pine forests, the sky a sliver of gray between the canopy. The town itself was a collection of tired-looking buildings huddled around a single main street. It felt forgotten by time, a place where secrets could fester undisturbed. I found what was left of the Havenwood Inn on a deserted road at the edge of town. It was just a foundation, a stone skeleton reclaimed by weeds and creeping ivy. A faded, "No trespassing" sign hung from a single hinge on a rusted chain-link fence. The air was heavy and still, thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something acrid and old, like the memory of smoke. I walked the perimeter, the crunch of my footsteps unnaturally loud in the silence. This was where they died. Robert, Mary, Sarah. My family. The word felt foreign, an ill-fitting coat. I saw the child's drawing in my mind's eye, the stick figures with their crossed-out eyes. Standing here, it felt less like a drawing and more like a testimony. On the edge of the property stood a leaning, weathered mailbox, the only part of the original structure still intact besides the foundation. My heart started to pound. With a trembling hand, I pulled the rusty key from my pocket. It slid into the lock. It turned with a groan of protest from the rusted metal. The small door creaked open. Inside, untouched for 15 years, was another padded envelope. It was addressed to Ethan Asher. My hands shook so badly I could barely open it. Inside was a single, laminated ID card. A student ID from a local community college. The picture was of me, the same carefree, 20-year-old face from the photograph. The name printed in bold letters was Ethan Asher. It was real. All of it. I wasn't David Thorne. David Thorne was a fiction, a ghost I'd been inhabiting for a decade. I was Ethan Asher, the sole survivor of a tragedy, a boy who had run away while his family burned. I sank to the ground, the ID card clutched in my hand, and a wave of nausea and vertigo washed over me. The world tilted on its axis. Fragments of memory, sharp and violent, pierced the fog in my mind. The smell of gasoline. Shouting, my father's voice, angry and afraid. The heat of the fire on my back as I ran through the woods. My sister's scream. I gasped, doubling over as the phantom pains of another life shot through me. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a mistake. It was an excavation, and someone was digging me up. I drove back in a fugue state, the 8-hour drive a blur of headlights and highway hypnosis. When I walked into my house, David's house, Claire was there. She was sitting on the sofa in the dark, as if she'd been waiting for me. "You went, didn't you?" she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. I didn't answer. I walked over to the coffee table and placed the student ID on it. Ethan Asher. The name lay between us, an indictment. She finally broke, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. Just a vast, cold emptiness. "Tell me," I said, my voice as empty as I felt. "Tell me everything. The truth this time." And so she did. The story spilled out of her, a decade of secrets unburdened in the dim light of our living room. She'd been a trauma nurse at a small clinic 2 towns over from Havenwood. I had stumbled in one night, covered in soot and scratches, incoherent with shock and suffering from what the doctors diagnosed as dissociative amnesia. I had no memory of who I was or what had happened. I was just a John Doe, a lost boy. The fire was ruled an accident, faulty wiring. But the case of the missing son, Ethan, remained open. Claire was assigned to me. She was young, compassionate, and she saw a broken soul she thought she could heal. "You were so lost," she whispered, her eyes pleading with me to understand. "You had nightmares every night. You'd scream, but you could never remember what you were dreaming about. The police would come to question you, and you just shut down completely. You were terrified of your own mind." Over months, she helped me. She gave me a new name, David, a name with no history, no ghosts. She helped me build a new past, a simple, clean story of a lonely orphan. It was a therapeutic lie, she told herself, a way to build a foundation where there was only rubble. And somewhere along the way, she fell in love with the man she had created. "I was going to tell you," she insisted, tears tracing paths down her face. "So many times, I almost told you. But you were happy. You were whole. How could I tear that all down? How could I tell you that your family didn't just die, but that you had to watch?" I stared at her, the architect in me seeing the fatal flaw in her design. She hadn't built a new life for me. She had built a beautiful, elaborate prison. A cage to keep Ethan Asher locked away. "Who is sending the packages, Claire?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "If the fire was an accident, who is doing this?" She looked away, and in that moment, I knew there was more. The lie wasn't finished. It wasn't an accident, was it? The silence stretched. "No," she finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "It wasn't. The police suspected arson, but they could never prove it. Your father. David, your father was in trouble. He owed a lot of money to some very dangerous people. He was involved with a local crime family, the Brellans. He was laundering money for them through the inn. The Brellans." The name landed in the quiet room with the force of a physical blow. I didn't recognize it, not consciously, but somewhere in the locked rooms of my mind, a door rattled on its hinges. A memory stirred, my father, his face pale with sweat, hiding a canvas bag full of cash in the floorboards of his office. My mother, crying in the kitchen, begging him to stop. He was trying to get out, Claire continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency as she laid the last of the truth bare. He had gone to the police. He was going to testify against them. They must have found out. The fire wasn't just arson, David. It was an execution. They killed your family to silence your father. You were the only witness. You were the one they didn't account for. A wave of cold dread washed over me, so intense it made my vision swim. I wasn't just a survivor. I was a loose end. For 15 years, I had been a ghost, safely hidden behind a new name and a life built of lies. But now, someone had found me. The packages weren't a cruel prank. The drawing of the burning house wasn't a memory. It was a promise. It was the Brellans, telling me they hadn't forgotten. They were coming to finish the job. How did they find me? I asked, my mind racing, the architect's logic kicking in, looking for patterns, for causes. We've been so careful. I don't know, Claire said, her voice shaking. For 10 years, nothing. Then you win that design award last month. The article about you, about us, it was in a national architecture magazine. Your picture was on the cover. It was the first time you'd had that kind of exposure. It's the only thing I can think of. The award. The pinnacle of my career as David Thorne was the very thing that had resurrected Ethan Asher. It was a cruel, cosmic irony. My success had been a beacon, guiding the monsters from my past right to our front door. As if on cue, a dark sedan with tinted windows drove slowly past our house. It was late, the street was empty, and its slow, deliberate pace was predatory. It didn't stop, but the message was clear. We see you. We know where you live. My blood ran cold. The sanctuary I had designed and built for us was no longer safe. It was a target. We have to go, I said, the words coming out hoarse. Now. All the love, all the betrayal, it didn't matter in that moment. All that mattered was the primal instinct to survive. To protect the woman who, for whatever reasons, had saved my life once before. Panic gave way to a strange, chilling clarity. The fog in my mind was receding, not just with memories of the fire, but with something else. Skills. Instincts. Ethan Asher wasn't just a scared kid who ran. He was a boy who had grown up in the woods of Maine. He knew how to hunt, how to track, how to disappear. David Thorne built houses to keep the world out. Ethan Asher knew how to survive when the world came for him. We moved quickly, throwing clothes, cash, and passports into a bag. I grabbed the old shoebox where I kept my birth certificate, my social security card, the founding documents of David Thorne. They felt like forgeries now, props from a play that had just ended. As I was about to close the lid, my fingers brushed against another document tucked into the bottom. It was a marriage certificate. Ours. I looked at it, at the two names, David Thorne and Claire Miller, signed in hopeful, flowing script. And underneath, in the section for witnesses, was another name. A name Claire had never mentioned. Dr. Alastair Finch. Who's Dr. Finch? I asked, holding the certificate out to her. Claire froze, her face paling. He was the doctor at the clinic. He oversaw your case. Was he the one who signed off on my new identity? On a new birth certificate? Her silence was all the answer I needed. He hadn't just treated a John Doe. He had helped create David Thorne. He was the architect of the lie. Claire, if the Brellans found me through that magazine article, they could find him, too. They'd want to know who helped me disappear. Is he in danger? A new, more terrible fear dawned in her eyes. Oh my God, she breathed. Alastair. He retired. He has a cabin up in the mountains, completely off the grid. We locked the doors of our perfect Victorian house, leaving the lights on as if we were just stepping out for a moment. But we both knew we were never coming back. As we pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was just a single image, a recent photo of a gray-haired man, Dr. Finch, standing on the porch of a rustic cabin, smiling. He was holding a copy of the same architecture magazine that had exposed me. The message was brutally clear. It wasn't just about me anymore. They were tying up all the loose ends. And we were driving straight towards the next one. The past wasn't just haunting me, it was hunting us. And for the first time, I wasn't just running from it. I was driving toward it, ready to fight for the only life I had. The drive into the mountains was a descent into a wilder, older world. Paved roads gave way to gravel, then to a dirt track barely wide enough for the car. My hands were steady on the wheel, a calm settling over me that was utterly alien to David Thorne but felt deeply familiar to Ethan Asher. Claire navigated, her voice tense as she read directions from a crumpled piece of paper. Dr. Finch's cabin was as remote as she'd promised, a final refuge at the end of a forgotten road. We found him on his porch, a rifle laid across his lap, watching the tree lean with the weary resignation of a man who knew his time was up. He saw our car and his shoulders sagged in relief. "Claire," he said, his voice raspy. "I was afraid they'd get to you first." The three of us sat in his dim, rustic living room as he filled in the final, dark corners of the story. After the fire, the Brellan family had put the word out. They were looking for Ethan Asher. Not to kill him, not at first. They wanted to absorb him. He was the son of a man who knew their secrets, a potential asset. But Ethan, in his traumatized state, was a liability. So Finch, with Claire's help, buried him. He falsified a death certificate for Ethan Asher and created a new identity for David Thorne, a clean slate. It was a risk, Finch admitted, his eyes full of a deep, paternal sorrow. But it was the only way to give you a life. We thought after 15 years, you were safe. The magazine article had been a fatal miscalculation. The Brellans hadn't just seen my face, they had seen my success, my stability. I wasn't just a loose end anymore. I was an insult. A witness who had escaped and thrived. That's when the headlights cut through the trees. 2 SUVs, blocking the only road out. They were here. There was no more running. My mind, a place that had been a foggy prison for a decade, was now a weapon. I saw the cabin not as a home, but as a structure, a blueprint. I saw the load-bearing walls, the weak points, the sightlines from the windows. The architect and the survivor merged. "Claire, call 911, I said, my voice calm. "Tell them the address and that there are armed intruders. Finch, the back door leads to a game trail. Can you get out?" He shook his head, picking up his rifle. "They're my demons, too, son. I helped start this. I'll help you finish it." A heavy thud rattled the front door. They weren't knocking. I looked at Claire, at this woman whose lies had both imprisoned and saved me. "I'm not that scared kid anymore," I told her, and for the first time, I knew it was true. I was Ethan. I was David. I was both. The front door splintered, and 2 men spilled into the room. But I was already moving, using Finch's heavy oak table as cover, shoving Claire toward the kitchen. The fight was brutal and short. The architect knew the angles, and the hunter knew the terrain. When the state troopers finally arrived, they found 2 intruders tied up with lamp cords and a third nursing a broken arm on the porch. Finch was calmly reloading his rifle. Claire was on the phone, her voice steady, directing the paramedics. I was standing by the window, looking out at the flashing blue and red lights that had finally, after 15 years, come for Ethan Asher. In the end, there was no dramatic courtroom showdown. My testimony, combined with the evidence Finch had preserved from my original case file, was enough. The Brellan Empire, built on fear and secrets, crumbled under the weight of a past that refused to stay buried. We sold the Victorian house. We couldn't live with the ghosts. We moved to the coast, to a small town where no one knew the names David Thorne or Ethan Asher. I went back to sketching. Not houses for clients, but a house for us. Something small, with lots of windows, built on a solid foundation of truth. Claire enrolled in a master's program for social work, determined to use her skills to help others, but without the lies. Our healing is a slow, quiet process. There are days when a shadow of the past falls over us, when the trust between us feels as fragile as old paper. But we talk. We face the ghosts together. We are not the perfect, happy couple from the first 10 years. We are something stronger, more real. We are survivors, rebuilding a life from the ashes of two broken ones. My name is David Asher now. It's a compromise, a fusion of the man I was and the man I've become. Sometimes, I still feel like a stranger to myself, a man piecing together a life from a collection of faded photographs and half-remembered dreams. But when I look at Claire, and I see the love in her eyes, a love that is no longer tangled in secrets, I know who I am. I am home. This is just one of the incredible true stories you'll find here on Echo Stories. If you enjoyed this journey through a fractured past and into a hard-won future, make sure to hit that like button. Until next time, remember that the strongest foundations are not those that have never been tested, but those that have been shattered and chosen to be built again.